So we have a plenary session now for the next hour or so. As I was mentioning, that's between us and the cocktails. So let's get through this. But it's going to be an enjoyable time, or it's going to be a fun session, as Stefan was suggesting earlier on, because we're going to be talking about software-defined vehicles, accelerating innovation and digitalizing the automotive domain. We've got 5 speakers for the session now, so I'd like to introduce each of them and invite them up onto the stage for our fireside chat that we're going to be having for the next hour or so here. First of all, Max Lemke. Apologies, I've bagged my seat, but Max, please do come up. Take the seat. Max, for those of you who know him, is head of the Internet of Things in the unit of the European Commission's Director General for Communication, Network, Content and Technology, DG CNECT, for those of you. But more importantly, of course, Max has been the initiator of the software-defined vehicle activities inside of the European Commission. So it's very good that we can have him on stage here tonight. Next up, you know him already, Armin Gräter, who is the Director of Public Affairs within the EU for the digital and automotive domain at BMW. But Max is also, Armin is also, most importantly for this discussion then, head of the CCAM Association. So you're wearing 2 hats tonight as well. Thank you for that. Next up, I'd like to welcome Jean-Baptiste Burtscher. Please come to the stage. Jean-Baptiste is the Sustainability, External Affairs and R&D Partnership Director at Valeo. So we have a good representation of the automotive supply chain here. Thank you for that. And finally, Margriet van Schijndel, who is a program manager responsible for mobility at TUe Eindhoven. So we have the full expertise here from academia right through to the Commission with the industry in between. So we're going to have a good discussion. And in the spirit of breaking silos, which we've been trying to do with the organization of this conference, and with a wish to involve other parts of Horizon Europe in the program, as you can see here, we decided early on to have a plenary session around the software-defined vehicle. A topic that holds much promise in the automotive domain, and one that, if you think about it, is at the crossroads between the partnerships that we've been talking about this last day, and we'll do so tomorrow. So 2.0 for energy and environment aspects, CCAM for the connectivity and the automation aspects, and of course then the recently launched CHIPS JU, and the technologies that we need to develop, the skills and the ability to integrate the software-defined vehicle into the automotive transport system. So we've got all the right people on the stage right now, and I'm especially happy to have Max on the stage with us to discuss this. Overall, what contributions or benefits can be expected from the software-defined vehicle during this transition that we're going through in road transport between green and digital? So I've got a series of questions coming up now. I'll stay up here if I may, and then I'll come and join you down on the seat. But first of all, maybe if I ask Armin to help us. There are microphones on the table there, so please use those microphones. For me, I'm not an expert in this domain at all, so please tell us, what is the software-defined vehicle from your perspective, from the industry perspective, and what advantages, possibly also what challenges will it bring us as we go forward? Thank you. Armin, please.
Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you very much, Simon. Yes, the software-defined vehicle isn't it a buzzword at the moment, but on the other hand, software is defining vehicles already. So we are just in the transition process of having software being I would even say decisive factor for people to buy a car or not. So software is the dominant factor of the future, no question. But as we understand, software-defined vehicle is much more about it. It's about coming from the hardware to ending at the application, what the customer sees when he drives the car or she, is really a lot of layers in between the hardware and the application. And all these layers are today depending from the hardware applied and also depending from the applications. And all these steps in between are not having typically added value to the customer. So why don't we identify all these layers which can be much more standardized, making them to a commonality between all OEMs and suppliers and saving a lot of costs and enabling much more possibilities for the future for all of us. All the differentiation between the vehicles can be done on the application layer, and all the basic performance can be done on the hardware. But if we add not the operating system of the hardware supplier, but a standardized hardware abstraction layer there, having a middleware which is standardized, applicable to all applications in the car, ideally, we could save a lot of cost. We could be much faster in applying the software to the car, and we could be also future proof, because, for example, with standardized software layers, you could much better also apply new hardware in the car to, for example, save energy in the calculation schemes of the hardware. But also you have so many, we call it in BMW system functions, which are like connectivity, security, redundancy mechanisms for safety of automated driving. All these things, the internal network management of the car, the bus systems, and all this stuff can be standardized much more than it is today. So all the suppliers and OEMs are agreeing that this is a big step in the future to be quicker and much more efficient.
Thank you very much, Armin. That's great. You can tell Armin's a dedicated engineer and salesman to this topic. I heard only benefits. I don't think I heard challenges, but I'm sure as we go through the rest of the discussion, we'll come to that as well. But not maybe first, because Max, as the initiator of this topic inside of the European Commission, why do we need to act? What do we need to act on? And what are the activities that are actually taking place right now? Please tell us all about that.
Yes? Yeah, now it works. Yeah, let me tell you a bit the story on this. I started on this about, not 2 years ago, less than 2 years ago. And we were confronted with a situation that the European automotive industry was suffering. There was a transformation ongoing in that sector with a need for increased computing power when you go to autonomous driving and extremely complex system functions, seeing that by 2030, 50% of the cost of the car would be on anything digital. So that was the challenge. We saw that there was a shift towards more centralized vehicle architecture, so a central car processor or domain processors. And we saw a disruption on the hardware side happening, so the processors we used until then were not useful anymore for the future. So there was a disruption going on, and the new technology for the ones who power autonomous driving, for example, was likely to come from American companies. So we saw unsustainable costs driven by the software complexity, and we saw the engineers wasting resources permanently in adaptation, upgrading, customization, in particular in the tier ones, the suppliers. They were spending their time, they were not creative anymore. So we saw, and then we saw the shortage of talents, and talents moving from one company to another. On the other hand, we saw a risk of dependence from other companies that didn't have headquarters in Europe and that we would become dependent on. So, and that's, for example, the hyperscalers, the hardware companies who were coming from the hardware side into the whole vehicle, or the hyperscalers coming from their niche, like the entertainment side, going into the whole vehicle. And we saw this, also the digital native companies coming. So there was fierce competition and a risk of dependence. So we then thought, okay, this is something where Europe has to act. Not a single company can do it, because we have to get this fragmentation again together. So every company started to have their own operating system. You know them, you heard it. There were press releases every second day on that. Though 80% of the functionality of the software-defined vehicle platform in the car is non-differentiating. Everybody needs it. And we all developed it on our own. So we said Europe must act, Europe must overcome fragmentation and gain back control of the critical elements of the value chain, and I would say the glue between the digital components. So that's what I would call, in simple terms, the software-defined vehicle platform. So until now we have done, and we have clear, it's not all committed yet, but we have reserved 200, together with industry and member states. So all together, it's an investment volume that we start in 23-24 of 250 million euros on that, to bring that together. You may say that's peanuts, because companies invest billions on the digital components, but it's just there to bring them together, to work together. And we do that primarily under the lead of the CHIPS joint undertaking, and together with CCAM and TUe, and we can go into that a bit later. It has two dimensions, I would say. It has the software dimension, so the software-defined vehicle ecosystem, where we develop building blocks under the initiative, mainly in open source. And it has the hardware dimension, where we look at an automotive hardware platform based on RISC-V. So again, open source. And we have now started investing in that collaboration, which is pre-competitive, and which is also, and that's very important, because the automotive companies are scared on that, in line with competition law. Because collaboration between companies on the same level is not easy. When you look at the national projects, for example, they are all vertical. One supplier, one OEM, and a couple of suppliers in a vertical value chain, most of them. So what we said is we have to do something where we build a platform which is neutral in a way, where they can all together and develop together. So we have started what we call, commission programs, so what is called a CSA, a support action, that's running since October, which is called Federate, where most of the OEMs and most of the tier ones are part. So they are partners in this consortium. We also have then started one big project that starts now February, March, on the hardware abstraction layer, to look at that the software platform becomes hardware agnostic, so we can exchange hardware wherever possible. So I wouldn't say we are religious about it. It doesn't have to. Sometimes we have to do hardware software co-design. We don't want to prohibit that. But we have started that, and we have another project called for now in the pipe on the APIs and the middleware. So going to the higher level, going down, going up on the software-defined vehicle platform together with that CSA, and then in 2024 we also start the RISC-V hardware automotive platform. So, and that is complemented by the functionality that comes out of, for example, for autonomous driving, for electric vehicles, that comes out of the partnership CCAM and TUe. And there are two calls this now in 2024, one in each of them, which also contribute again from the side of the functionality of the autonomous vehicle or the electric vehicle. So all together, this is an investment volume, means commission funding, member states funding, industrial funding of 250 million that we will commit to in 23-24. But the calls are already defined and open, so that means the commission funding is made available, not committed in contracts, but available. So that's our first investment on that, and we plan to continue to go further.
Max, thank you very much. That's excellent. We've got a thorough history of what's been going on and why, and that seems very, very consistent. And we've also got some good promises for the future in terms of the projects and the possible funding that we've got available. Let me turn to the supply industry now, to Jean-Baptiste from Valeo in relation to, what do you think about that, perhaps in relation to the two partnerships that we've just talked about, CCAM and TUe? Are we getting enough with that plan? Do we need more? Can you tell us anything more about what we might need from other partnerships? Please.
Well, thank you, Simon, for the question, and very happy to be with you today. Much has been said by Max, and I first want to thank the Commission and all the partners that have joined us journey on SDV since now indeed almost 2 years. And indeed DigiConnect and also now DigiRTD are very much supportive on what has been done. And we need obviously to continue. And Max has clearly explained the twofold strategy that we have, starting from the KDD now, chips GU, and the two PPPs, CCAM and TUe. And it's indeed, I would say, important to continue in a way that, well, we need to secure that ecosystem beyond the fact that we have started to do it. And indeed, we have now that project that is called Federate. And I think the name speaks for itself. It's really here to federate the ecosystem, to bring the ecosystem together, because it's really new. And that call is, I mean, it's a CSA. I mean, and you all know what a CSA is all about. It's really bring the players and the stakeholders together. But as said, we are going now to move to functions, and this is also to be addressed. And on the other side, I say Max explained it clearly, and that's also a message I want to convey from the industry side. It could be a competition issue there. It could be also the fact that at some point maybe companies have the temptation to say, well, I would like to do many things alone, and I don't want to be still in that attitude of creating an open ecosystem and having that the standardized and the open source work that we have with starting in SDV. So we need to indeed give also a kind of security and midterm vision of how SDV is going to be supported in Europe by the Commission and the Member States. And in a sense, we are pledging for finding a way to secure that over time, and not being in a phase where we begin negotiate in a sense every year or every 2 years what could be the single call that will be allocated to SDV. So that was also my message there. And lots have been done. If you think where we were 2 years ago, we had almost nothing there. It's been a huge work since 2 years, and we need obviously to continue.
Thank you very much for that. That's great. On an open stage, you're getting further feedback now as what we can do better to go on further forward. So that's much appreciated about the discussion that we're going to have here. Clearly, if we're going to make this transition, then we're going to need to be equipped to address the changes. I'm thinking, and I'm looking at academia and the university side here, are we equipped inside of Europe then to provide the skills that we need to make these changes going forward? Margriet, this is your area of expertise.
Thank you, Simon. I'll take the liberty to not go for a yes or no answer, because I think that would be unfair. You could say for OEMs, the way they'll work will fundamentally change, but that's not fair, because it's not only for the OEMs. It actually will have a huge effect on the whole value chain. So the way of working will hugely differ the things. The way of working, the way of offering, and the way of collaborating. I'm making that a bit more specific. If you look, for instance, at electric software-defined vehicles, you need different skills. You need less than before mechanical engineers, which does hurt for me as a mechanical engineer. Yeah, but I still have a job. I'm quite convinced about that. But we need less mechanical engineers. We need other skills added to the picture in developing the vehicles, but also in developing the production lines, for instance. So we need to look beyond the vehicle itself, what other effects there are, like electrical engineers, software engineers, data scientists, mathematicians, a lot others that we need. Yet we have to be careful that many of these people don't know too much about the vehicle and mobility specificities. So we can't just let them go and develop software for the vehicle. We need to integrate. We need to make sure we have contextual knowledge in the way that we act and do it in a systems approach. And to get there, yes, I think we need to adjust the education at, for instance, universities, but that's going to be on the longer term. You need to develop your education, you need to train the people, and that's not enough for what we need to make this happen. We need also a huge re-education of our current workforce to make this happen, to be honest. I'm sorry, I see you look like, ooh, this is going to be difficult. But I think, and I hope, that the initiative that Max was presenting is going to help to create coherence and also scale to speed up this re-education and reskilling that we do need, and to define what it is that we need, because it's hard to answer that question for now. Luckily, many of our member states have invested also in programs like lifelong learning to make sure that we all are still able to learn after we finish our universities. So I think I have good hopes that we'll manage to get there. So are we ready? Not yet, my answer would be. But I think in Europe we have shown that we are agile and we can adjust to changes. Like when we moved our discussions from automotive to mobility and logistics. That's adding a huge sector to it and a huge couple of problems to add to what we are discussing. Also in our whole transition towards electrified mobility, that disrupted our sector also partially, but we're still here. Also, when we decided and finally understood, maybe I should say, that we have to make human factors an integral part of our development and implementation. So we have shown already in the past we can make such a change. Are we there yet? No, but I'm quite sure we'll get there.
Thank you very much. I know when we ask you a question, we get an extensive answer, thank you, with lots of information, but also that's feedback for yourself, isn't it, Max, in terms of things that we need to do. So I'll just go around the loop again. I won't keep to the order in future. I'll jump around between people, and if people want to jump in, please give me a signal and we can do that as well. But I guess the ball has been passed back to yourself there, Max. Have we got enough inside of Europe? What else do we need to do inside of Europe to attract the talent, to make sure that in a global environment we rank in comparison, or we're better than some of the other regions, so that we can ensure that we've got the skills and also the workforce to make this transition to the software-defined vehicle in the future? How are we going to contribute in that area? Do you feel you can give us some pointers on that point?
Yeah, I think in a way, it's important that we do it the European way to get companies together. So we have in the US, we have big hardware companies, we have hyperscalers, we have the digital native car makers. They sometimes have influence due to their sheer size or market capitalization, if you want to call it that way. We have China, which is led from the top. Is my understanding. There is very strong competition coming from China, and we have to see how we do it our way. We have individual companies who compete on talent, for example, and what I've done is I've got them all around the table about 1.25 years ago. So I have what I call the governance group for this initiative. I have one representative per big OEM, per big tier one, and we discuss how we do that together. And I can say all of the big ones were always in these meetings, yeah, on both sides, OEM and tier ones. And that's something new, that we get them around the table in a very safe environment. And I think with that we are discussing the issues like talent. How can we save resources? How can we make it more attractive that automotive is not anymore a dirty industry, which is not, and also how we can present the challenges to our engineers in universities. And we decided to choose open source as the paradigm that we want to build on, because it offers us huge advantages also to get, and that's a lot of the constituency here, how to get the researchers more engaged, because they lack the talent through the open source, and the university institutes can contribute, the RTOs can contribute, and we can better collaborate across the sector without being accused of going against competition or so, because we act in a pre-competitive setup on non-differentiating elements. We work together vertically and horizontally in this kind of matrix set up, and we follow even for the, that's important for the OEMs in particular, we follow a code-first approach, so they don't have to agree across all companies how they do it. We code and we see how it comes together, and then we take a system-level approach to look at it. So we come from both sides, and that way become more agile, because we don't have to agree on everything. So at the end, I think we hope that with that we can attract the talent and again get OEMs and tiers to compete on innovative car features rather than tie their hands to customization and upgrade.
Thank you for that, Max. That's good, and that's a good response. But I think we better give the ball back then to the industry side, maybe to yourself, Armin. What's your view as a global OEM about the situation inside of Europe compared to the rest of the world, for example?
Well, yes, I fully agree, Max. We have really big challenges in working together horizontally, and the scheme of the CHIPS joint undertaking gives us this possibility, which wouldn't have been there without it. So yes, if I compare it to, let's say, 25 years ago when I started in electronics in BMW, first ideas of functional safety and standardized operating systems for computers coming up with AUTOSAR, I think 20 years ago around, and then it evolved very, very slowly, and we are seeing that AUTOSAR consortium, which is a kind of predecessor of what we are having here now, has evolved a lot over the whole world now with more than 400 members. So this is also one thing which we need to look at. We have now a project here and a very good program around these projects, and we are trying to be as agile and open source as possible. AUTOSAR is not open source, but it's so much now a de facto standard that nearly every company in the world is part of AUTOSAR, so everyone can use it by very low rates now. So this was a very slow process, and we now try, I think, with this, enabling projects to make a much quicker project, more agile than in the past. And I also believe that this commonality software building blocks, as we call them, are really open source possible and can be much more developed much more agile than in the past. I can give an example from BMW. We included a large-scale Scrum in our development of assistant and automated driving, and we learned a lot about that, and we even adapted our career mechanisms in personnel department to attract high-level experts. So they don't need to be managers, they need to be good experts and be paid for that as well. So skills is really a key topic, and with these experts on board, we can also support these ideas of open source, code first, agile development of the building blocks. Many of them are there already. They need to be included in the program, and we need to build around them to build up this ecosystem.
Thank you, Armin. That's sounding remarkably positive and remarkably coordinated. I really do like that approach. That's very positive. But then let me shift the discussion a little bit further on. We seem to have an alignment, we seem to know what the needs are, we seem to be able to think about how we can push Europe inside of that domain, but how are we going to make a business out of it, and a business out of it for the European manufacturers as well? How can we use the data to add value and bring that back into the economy. And I'm looking at Jean-Baptiste because I know you have a history of working on Catena X. Has that experience helped you at all to think about how Valeo and other tier suppliers then can help make a business out of this opportunity with a software-defined vehicle?
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and indeed, I would like to tell you the story here about Catena and how I see making a step back or maybe a step forward of the link with the SDV topic. In short, maybe some of you have heard about Catena X, so it's an initiative that started 2 years ago in Germany and now in Europe. You have the major player of our industry in this initiative, major OEMs and tier ones, but also the software industry like the SAP, Siemens, and people helping for the data infrastructure. And the objective is to address the way to build complex data chains for use cases that are, well, those of our industry and that are much pushed by the complexity of the products and the regulation at the same time, like end-to-end traceability, digital product passports, carbon footprint, moving to primary data, demand and capacity management. So actually what makes our competitiveness in our industry. And if you look at that, today you have different solution. Each and every OEM or tier one is building its own platform for its own suppliers. You have lots of different ways to compile the data, lots of different ways to bring the data sets together. And in a sense, this is not sustainable for our industry. And if we don't decide to address those challenges together, we're not going to survive. And in a sense, this is very close to what we see in the SDV topic. And what we have proposed to do in Catena is that we have built actually what we call now a data space. So we are in another area of the digital policy of the European Commission, the one related to the Gaia X and the data space. And in this data space, we are creating the piece of standards in an open source collaborative mode. This is backed also by the Eclipse Foundation. And well, we invite all those that want to join this initiative to come and to help us to write what we call standards, but call it, for your understanding, I would say ideal data set to master one use case like traceability or PCF. If you say, I want to measure the carbon footprint of a product, what is a product, what is a part, what is the primary data, what is the quality gate of the data I need to master to make sure that the CO2 data I'm accounting are relevant, and so on and so forth. And this is made in open source, and those open source codes are then made available to everyone so that the software applicants can propose software that are interoperable. The objective is to make this happen, to have competitiveness, to have different players emerging on the market, but to make sure that the software industry is able to address the needs that we have and that we want to achieve by putting those data chains together and not having just one solution that is emerging as a single solution, but to have indeed many solutions based on the needs of each and every company, but with this common layer of standards. And I think here we have really, by describing it like I've done it, very common grounds with what we are addressing in SDV. We cannot master SDV alone. We need to bring different players together. There is clearly a competitiveness issue, a competitive law issue, as we were mentioning before. We are talking about digital and data maturity, and this comes also by creating those initiatives. And at the same time, we want to keep that ecosystem open and secured. I mean, each and every one needs to be sovereign on the way he's designing his own software, he's taking the data, he's sharing the data. I mean, and really, this is the way, globally, I would say, the data and the software topic is evolving in our industry. Should it be for SDV or should it be for more software related to the product process or supply chain topic? And for me, this is really the way also I see this topic evolving in Europe. And let's say, and let's keep the words of Max saying we should do it in an European way, bringing competition and bringing this pre-competitive work together. So well, this is for me really paving the way also how SDV is certainly going to evolve with building some, I would say, European initiative with I would say, these commonalities, but each and every company keeping its capacity to evolve with its differentiation that I mean, each company want to keep. So sorry for that, making it long, but I think it was a way to illustrate the way this is now evolving in our industry.
Jean-Baptiste, thank you. That was excellent. I might be lost, but I'm sure there are lots of people in the audience who have completely understood that. But before I jump back to you, Margriet, let me just ask the other side of that equation a little bit. Let's go back to the OEM perspective, because in my career, I've had lots of discussions with OEMs about who owns the data when it's put on the cloud, or who owns the data when it's kept into the vehicle, as a service supplier from my side as well. What's your opinion on that, Armin? Do you reflect the same view as Jean-Baptiste, or can you add anything more to that? And particularly in relation to the activities that we have here today in Brussels, in relation to our Horizon Europe funded projects, which are collaborative, cooperative, how are we going to manage this data ownership aspect, which is part of the source of the business that we have coming up here? Do you have an opinion on that, please?
Absolutely. It's really not an easy thing, and maybe I was too positive with my first two statements, so I also give the downside a bit now. It's not easy to share data if you're coming from a big and successful OEM, and we have areas where we don't share data for the moment. For example, when it comes to level 3 validation data, this is a topic which is everyone here in the room, or many research institutes would like to share, or to be a partner sharing these data, but there was a big effort to come to this data. We are talking at the moment in BMW about 150 petabytes of validation data for level 3, and this is obviously nothing to be shared on a broad basis for the world. This is really, let's say, the core of the innovation, which is also differentiating in competition. Obviously, we need to share data on things which are not competitive. And we are doing that in level 3 pilot in high drive, and we will do that further in research projects, no question, on another level. We will also be happy to share software code when it's not differentiating. So, because Max, you talked about the operating systems, maybe there's a misunderstanding which we need to clarify here. Operating systems are like from Apple, so it's really the application layer, which is differentiating from other brands. So the operating system, which is announced by BMW or Mercedes or Audi or Tesla or whatever, is always the application layer of how the HMI is applied to the car, and this is not something which can be, which is highly competitive. So these will happen in the future as well. But if we talk about the technical operating system of the computer in the car, this is a completely different story. This is really commonality and needs to be standardized in the program which we are talking about here. So this is, I think, the key to understand where is the innovation and the competitiveness of technology, and where are the commonalities. And you're completely right, Max, 80% of the development is commonality, and we can share and improve and be quicker here.
Thank you, Armin. Margriet, trust me, I am going to get to you, but I can see these two gentlemen here are about to start a very good discussion, and I want the audience to hear a little bit of that. Max, you clearly have a response to that, please.
I can be relatively short on that. So how we make sure that this is really going into business and into use with researchers involved. First of all, we clearly say, do not reinvent the wheel. So we are building on AUTOSAR, we build on Covesa, on SOAFI, and in particular on the Eclipse working group. So not reinvent. Second, we have been, and that's probably something new, the Commission has been extremely agile on this, because after 4 months after the first meeting with the OEMs, we had the first program launched with an investment volume asking for 70 million. So that was, I think that was record time, because normally we are well known for not being so agile with our programs. So, and then what we have done is we have said industry must be in the driving seat. That's why my governance group has all of these actors together, and they say what has to be done. There's a strong role for OEMs, for RTOs and universities, but in these projects are lean, so they have to contribute to the industrial objectives, because the industrial competitiveness is one of the is the major goal. So I think that's extremely important to make that successful. So that distinguishes that a bit from some common practice we have in research program in my areas, in other areas.
Thank you. This discussion is going to run and run, but probably not on this stage right now. That's very good to hear that. Margriet, I've ignored you for a while. Sorry about that. Let's give you 2 questions in one. You can, of course, respond to this discussion about open or closed or cloud-sourced information and data handling. But from my minimal experience in this domain, one of the things that I know possibly as a user that you think about, especially when you're going to your HMI, as you were talking about, where is software updates over the air during the vehicle lifetime. Is that a reason to be afraid, or is that an opportunity? What novelties can that bring? But you are allowed to talk about data handling as well, if you want to, in answer to that question.
Well, am I allowed also to jump into what Armin said about the non-differentiating aspect?
Of course. Free domain.
There's one challenge that I really would love us to include in our European initiative, to make sure that we address it jointly. And I know partially at the end of the road it will be differentiating to some extent, but I think the software-defined vehicle can offer us huge benefits on coherence for the big leap forward towards energy efficiency of our vehicles. I think we all know that automated vehicles are not overly energy efficient yet. There are some challenges there, much to be done, but I think not with incremental steps, but with a much more fundamental change. And moving towards a software-defined vehicle, I think we can do that. Well, we work on both the software and the related hardware to make that happen. And I think for me what was quite inspiring that the Dutch chip machine manufacturer ASML recently announced that their newest machine, the really top-notch machine, uses 40% less energy than its previous edition by working on the software and the related hardware. And just to give you an understanding of how much that is, the original machine uses the equivalent of 3,500 households, just one machine. If they can do that in one company, a huge company, but what can we establish in our collaboration? I think it can be huge, though we have to be critical and not to do window dressing. Because we can say, we do a lot of the calculations in the cloud, so the vehicle itself is much more energy efficient. Well, we've been to those discussions. We don't want to have that. We need to have the well-to-wheel type of approach there, I think. So that's feeding back to what you were saying, Armin. I think this is partially non-differentiating, but at some point, of course, the OEMs will make the last mile definitely differentiating. That was the first question, right?
That was the first question, but you've changed the subject here quite completely. But
well, I put a challenge, which I think is really important. If we go for the software-defined vehicle, if we leave this topic behind, it is such a pity. It's not making use of some of the things we're good at and the ambitions we should have.
Well, then let me take the opportunity here, Margriet, because you know you know that I agree with you on this point, but I see somebody, Jean-Baptiste, you were looking like you wanted to jump in on that point. Maybe we're going to find out what the actual kilowatt levels are for these things. Yeah.
No, I fully agree, and it's extremely important that we address the carbon footprint, not just talking about what we call the Scope 3 upstream for those that are familiar with the way to count on CO2, but also the way we use the products and the carbon impact of the products. And just if you look at how at the vehicle level, the time we needed to create scenarios and standards to measure that commonly, I mean, it's not an easy job, so we need to address that really upfront to take it from the beginning. And that's also just, sorry to re-put that in the discussion, but that's also one of the things we wanted to address with, and we want to address with CNECT, the fact that you need to standardize the data on, and the data sets, the way you account for, on CO2, and to find a way, I mean, to make it standard for the whole industry and the different commodity and supply chains that are contributing to our sector. So this is also a topic for hardware, because today, I mean, we're still in a moment where we're not completely done with clearly measuring the carbon impact of the different hardware that we are using. We should move to software as well. So clearly, yes, and we should build frameworks, standards, and solutions to bring that together. So I very much support your point, and I very much also support that we find some nice support from the Commission in dedicated projects for that.
Another hint there, but that's very good. I know CCAM themselves are looking at this topic a little bit, so that's good. But I've got two people here who maybe want to say something. Armin, is that gaze at me to say you want to come in there a little bit?
Well, yes, I can't speak for electromobility. Maybe Stefan can have a statement in the question and answer round later on. On the energy consumption of the car for automated functions, I can really say that there are big steps forward. When we initially planned a level 3 system in prototypes, we had really talking about far beyond 1 kilowatt, which we needed in the car. And I can tell you that today we are at a few hundred watts only, so it's more than less than 50% of the original planned consumption. So we are doing these steps, and definitely the chips are getting better and better. So this is more on the supplier side and on the tier N, let's say, in the chain. But CNECT gives a good framework that we understand what's going on there, and we fully support that, absolutely. This is crucial for the future, no question.
Thank you. But Max, you wanted to come in on this point
as
well.
Yeah, I would say I fully support what has been said here by my colleagues here. I would like to say, when I look at it from the European Commission's perspective, we always have to look a bit at what should we support and what will the market do. So we should not waste our money like in Germany. Often we call that Gießkannenprinzip. You put a bit everywhere and at the end you reach nothing. Yeah? So we on purpose decided to focus on the software-defined vehicle to be hardware agnostic, because if we don't master the glue of the digital components, we don't master the value chain and supply chain anymore in Europe. So we have to keep that control. And on the other hand, we have said we have to, maybe not all in future, not all hardware, digital hardware will be European. I don't expect that. But we should be able to build hardware for our cars, and if we can, on all kind of ranges, the low range and the high-end system. That's why we go for this RISC-V approach for European hardware. These are two initiatives in a way, because if we cannot put that into one, because they have conflicting interests. We want to get hardware agnostic on the software side, and on the other hand, we want to develop hardware. No OEM would today say, I build my car only on European hardware, but we would like to get hardware into that game from Europe again. So we are trying that from these two directions, but connected, but independent in a way, with different time scales, aiming at all these things that were said, over the air updates. I would say not only for updates, I was part of heard a panel recently, a week ago or two, from the Financial Times with some CTOs of automotive tiers and OEMs. They were basically saying they want to unlock functionalities that you can buy for your car over the air without change of hardware and software. So you may just buy your heating system, that was an extreme example, just for the winter. Yeah, so basically, and then they stop it again over the air. So it's like your phone. Yeah, and I think these are the things that we can unlock with this. So for us, the major points now is to address the key use cases. So plug and charge, including bidirectional charging. To come back to the EV call, is a very important one, and also the proof of concept that we use secure and stable open source with automotive grade in the company software stacks. That's another one. The one is more functional, and this one is more non-functional. Yeah. So, thanks.
Thank you, Max. So you've turned an energetic question into a public policy and security answer. That's great as we've gone along the line here. Let me, because time is pressing on a little bit, we've probably got time for one more good point for discussion. Let's move back to Margriet, because maybe you wanted to answer another question, or maybe I'm allowed to pose a question now, because we've talked about over-the-air updates, etc. And we heard earlier on today then a presentation about some of the, let's say, trustworthiness aspects of connected and automated vehicles. What about the cybersecurity aspects? What, for me as somebody who doesn't know anything about this, what can you tell me about that in relation to the software-defined vehicle? Is there anything that we need to be aware of?
How much time did I get for this one?
You've got about a minute at most, I think, to keep the cocktails fresh. We've got about a minute each.
I think it's a very valid question and a very hard one to answer just in 1 minute or in 55 seconds, because there's so much to take care of, and the whole trustworthiness of the CCAM mobility, for instance, stands and falls with cybersecurity. And I think, and again, addressing Max and the colleagues, is this has to be on the agenda for the SDV initiative, to secure this, to find common approaches, common way of working to really make sure that we cover this, that we understand also what is the issue with cybersecurity, to what extent, and whose responsibility is it where. There are a lot of questions there. Now I have 10 seconds left, but there's no answer to how is this going to be solved. We need to get together and act on this, for sure.
Thank you, Margriet. This must be a difficult question because nobody else is popping up and saying, Simon, I want to say anything. Armin, are you looking at me with an answer?
I just thought about it, but I add another aspect to it, because I think the elephant in the room is artificial intelligence here. And if we come to artificial intelligence and cybersecurity, it's very clear that the challenges are the highest ever. And before we enter up in, let's say, self-learning cars, which we don't do at all at the moment, I can tell you from BMW, we are only training algorithms with development vehicles, and then the trained algorithm comes to the car. This is the way to do it for also type approval relevant and safety relevant issues. But in a long-term perspective or mid-term perspective, it will develop very fast now, these schemes. This is the crucial point for the future of development of new functionalities, even safety-relevant functions in combination with artificial intelligence algorithms. And cybersecurity is the key success factor for this in the future, no question.
Thank you, that's important. Cybersecurity, of course, we've got to go down to the component level as well. What about the tier one aspects? Have you got any further comment on security aspects in relation to that? Or if that's something you don't want to talk about, let me maybe ask you an even more difficult question. Affordability, how's that going to be affected in this new software-defined vehicle domain? Anything you can promise on stage here in front of an OEM?
So I'm not selling cars, so I'm safe on that side. But I think it's an important question because you're putting the question of competitiveness of the industry and as well for the end consumer and the way of well, we're going to evolve in a world where we're being in a post-consumer world. I mean, people are not willing to buy just a car, or most of the time they don't want to buy a car. They're living in cities and so on. I mean, all those debates about the fact that the industry is facing this big transformation, and indeed, how is going SDV to help us to address those challenges? And I think, yes, it's going to help us because at the moment where you're decoupling hardware and software, you give the chance to keep certainly the vehicle longer, to upgrade the functions, and also to help us shifting in business models. So where indeed we're going to help to offer more services, where we'll be able to upgrade the functions indeed to address the new needs in terms of mobility. Should it be expanding the range, modifying the part of the scenarios when you are driving in cities or out of the cities and so on. And so for me, yes, SDV is clearly helping us in that notion of affordability, in the sense of not affordability of the car, but affordability of the service that is offered in terms of mobility.
Thank you very much. That's a positive note almost to end on, but we started with the industrial view, so I better end letting the European Commission give their view on what they've heard now. I've got a couple of announcements to make after this, so before we get to the cocktails, please don't leave as soon as Max has said his last word. But Max, the last word is yours.
Yeah, I'll speak another half hour now to keep you away from your cocktail. No, just to say cybersecurity, I would say there is a big challenge now that we have, or a solution coming up, hopefully, we have to see, and that is artificial intelligence, in particular generative AI, which I hope can help us to improve our software engineering process, our maintenance process, to become more productive, to become more secure, and to become safer. That's a research topic still, I would say. So that's one of the topics where I hear a lot of tiers and OEMs to say, if we can get that more productive, we would save resources, we would save talent, but it has also to be safe that we leave a lot of things to machines. And last but not least, I would just say this is what we plan here on software-defined vehicle together with all the actors. It's a collective effort of all actors. That's important. And we are all operating on global markets. So it's not the Europeans to build a fence around themselves, but there is openness towards others who want to collaborate under the model. I mean, clearly we have an interest in European lead, but we are also wanting to work with others on the global markets. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Max. So I've heard a positive note for you there, Margriet, that there's an opportunity with AI for some more research as well, so you'll clearly get involved in that. But I also heard about collective involvement here. So may I ask from all of you here collectively for a round of applause for our panellists keeping you occupied here.